So let's get started, everybody. Welcome to today's War and Peace lecture series, where we will be continuing in the third week of our four-week sequence on issues of human rights in the United Nations. And our speaker tonight is the Executive Director of the International Bill of Rights, which is a movement that is trying to make a globally enforceable Bill of Rights worldwide for everybody. So Kurt Boyd is going to speak with us tonight about that. Just this night, I talked about it with him, we're going to break a rule here. We're going to encourage you, if you want to, use your cell phones to explore this site. He'll explore some of it with you. It's got 30 different clauses in it about rights and how they can be enforced. If you're interested in exploring the website while he's speaking, I think you can raise your hand and ask a question. If you want to be interactive and take questions from you guys, so feel free to do that. We're not sure you can do it from your cell phone, but if you go on the website, you can go and leave comments on iBoard. Whether you decide that you want to support it and sign it or not, you can still put your input into the process of the evolution of this movement. And Kurt is here to speak with us tonight about it and to give us the latest updates on it. So please welcome Kurt Boyd. Give him your attention.
Okay, let's see. Can you all hear me? That's a good starting point.
Turn it on.
Turn it on. Okay, that would be an even better starting point. Okay, how about now? Is that better? No? Can you control it from there, or am I control it here? Okay. All right, so how about up there? Can you hear me? Yeah? Or no? You can. Okay, good. And over there? Okay, good. Well, it's a pleasure to be here this evening, and thank you for the introduction. I was here last year, and I enjoyed having a discussion about the idea of an international Bill of Rights, and moreover, the idea of the emergence of humanity having an agreement to live together. And I'll tell you a little bit about my own background, just so you get a sense of where this is coming from. I am a lawyer, and I went to Berkeley for law school, and I was with a big firm, and then I had my own firm with others, still do. But I've taught a lot. I've taught at the UC down in Santa Barbara, and I've taught at Berkeley at the law school. And I usually teach civil rights, or I teach human rights, or I teach constitutional law. And I'm curious, how many of you have had any civil rights or constitutional law background? None? A few. Right? A few? I'm curious, just want to get at the starting point. The other thing that I'm really curious about is how many of you have ever read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Raise your hands if you have. All right, that's good. That's a large number. It's supposed to be taught in the high schools. You know, it's in our education code here in the state of California, and it's required, but they don't always get to it. I know with my own sons, they kind of mentioned it, but they never really even discussed it in any depth in the Bay Area. So it's kind of surprising, and that's part of the reason why I do this work. And so in my teaching, what I really emphasize is this nexus between practice, what it means to be a civil rights lawyer like me, who stands up in court and argues cases for people who've had their civil rights violated. And I've argued in every court, including the United States Supreme Court. And so I'm used to being there and talking to judges, and the beauty that I like is I'll stand up in front of the judge and I'll say to her, I want an order. I'm not asking, I'm not begging, I'm there in a pleasant way, I'm demanding. I'm saying, hey, here's this document. It's our United States Constitution. It's got the Bill of Rights. You know how lawyers are? They like to get them out and wave them around. Judges usually like looking at them too, actually. I think judges are great when it comes to enforcing rights for the most part. I don't always agree, but for the most part, I'll get to that part of it later. It's a great place to be able to have somewhere to go. So I'm keen on enforcement. I think that without enforcement, you really don't have rights. You can talk about them, and you can go ahead and you can assert them, but unless you can get that order, unless you can tell her, hey, I want an order right here, I want to go, I'm going to stop this from happening, or allow this free speech to occur, or give these women an equal opportunity in school, give them equal rights in athletics, or whatever the issue is. And I've argued all of these. There's something concrete that comes of it. Okay? So that's part of my starting point. The other part is that rights are never done. There's a great line that by a civil rights lawyer many years ago saying, it's a struggle to create them and a struggle to enforce them. So I'm as interested in the creation part as I am in the enforcement part. Because I think it's really important that you're always thinking about how to expand rights. I think rights are an evolutionary process. When I was coming up today, I was thinking about some recent examples that I think that you could all latch on, because sometimes we have kind of a jaded feeling towards rights. We think, you know, that they're being curtailed, or rights are something that are just kind of stagnant. Well, are they? Who in this room, and listen, I've been told that you, and I recall this from last year, you're an interdisciplinary group, and I got some really good answers last year, so I'm going to dare to ask some more, because I'm not going to, you know, when I teach, I actually use a seating chart. And I don't use it in a mean manner. I actually get to know the students. I usually only have about 60. So I don't have the benefit of the chart, so I'm not going to call on anybody, but I hope you'll answer this question. What is an example of a recent right that is percolated up through the system and the courts to where it's a constitutional right that other people, not even 2 decades ago, said, never, not. And I don't have a chart, so I'll be stubborn. Yeah?
Marriage?
What kind of marriage?
I would just say the choice of who you marry, just the definition of marriage.
Right.
I could just say gay marriage, but I would say, definition.
Right. The definition of marriage has changed, right? Now any 2 people can marry. And did they think that that was going to be possible 20 years ago? A few. See, it's always a few. That's why I'm here too. I'm here because I'm hoping that a few of you will keep in mind this evolution of rights. You know, I had a great professor one time when I was in college, teaching a course called Parapolitics, a guy named Raghavan Iyer. Iyer was brilliant. And he came out and he came into the room. I was thinking about this today too. Because now his son is a great philosophical travel writer, but he's written a book called Global Soul. I may mention books along the way. It'd probably be the best thing. If you don't take any notes, just write down a few of the books that I might mention, because Global Soul is worth, if you have any interest in the evolution of humanity and rights, I think Global Soul is wonderful. But enough of the son, the father, Raghavan, came out and he said, look, you're all here, and I realize that I'll probably only be able to leave one thought with you. I know you're paying attention, and I can see you're paying attention. I appreciate that. But I'll only leave one thought with you. And I want it to be this. And he said, there is enough to go around. And it always stuck with me because a lot of people are really negative about rights, and they think, oh, you know, there's not enough to go around. There's not enough education. There's not enough health care. How can you have those as human rights? But the fact is, and I'll talk more about this, that there is enough to go around. especially when it comes to rights. We can have more of them. And so I have this combination that I bring to you tonight, this combination of enforcement of rights with the creation of rights. And on the creation side of it, it's also a really interesting evening for me, because right now with our project, and we've been going for a number of years now, we've been at the Berkeley Law School for a number of years, and now we're a nonprofit. So that's kind of a big change. It has pros and cons. On the academic side, I really have enjoyed being together with a lot of the great academic minds from around the world who have been thinking about, okay, if you're going to have a global Bill of Rights or an international Bill of Rights, what should you put in it, and how should it be worded so that it actually works? And that's been a good thing. But at the same time, it's been kind of stuffy, and it's been a little bit crimped. You know, that at some point, if you're going to have rights, that you're talking about a revision of the social contract, and everyone should be involved. So that's where we are right now, too. And that's the other thing that I'm going to talk to you more about, is we're trying to decide right now how to best present this document, including what to call it. So later, I'm going to ask you about that. Okay? So that's the starting point. Any questions so far? Okay, so we're looking at enforcement of rights, we're looking at the creation of rights, and we're thinking about how do we actually manifest rights in society. We're going to cover those things. Now, to do that, and by the way, I promise you that I am going to stop by 5:40, 5:45 at the latest, so that I can go ahead and have questions and answers and get input. Because I'll explain to you why. I think as I go through some of the history, you'll see why I want to get your thoughts as well as share mine. For one, that's part of the reason I do this, is because I've always found from teaching that I learn in the process. And so that's one of the main reasons I'm willing to come do this. So let's take a look at some history so that we get a sense of how rights have evolved. Because one of the things that I've been asked to think about with you is what are the strengths and weaknesses of the existing system, and why do we need to do something more with the existing system? And I really think it helps if you look back historically in order to get a sense of that. So I'm going to give you, first off, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to just tell me what you think of this. Okay? You listen closely and think about whether, you know, what's your gut reaction to what I'm going to say. A Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, and what no just government can deny. What do you think of that? A Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, and which no just government can deny. Yeah?
It's solid as long as we get every government to sign up.
That's, everyone hear his point? Said, well, it's a nice thought, but it's a hard thing to get the governments to sign up. That's true, right? It's hard to get the governments to sign up. But who's in charge? As long as we're starting on the history part of this, who's in charge? Anybody ever study Rousseau in here? Come on. Oh, how about just philosophy?
That's all the nation is in charge. Like in our nation, we're fortunate that it's by the people, right? Both representative government, I suppose, but still by the people. But in certain nations, people don't have those.
Well, let's plumb that. What he's saying is it depends on the nation. Does it? Does it depend on the nation?
What did Cynthia say last week about that?
Yeah. Does it depend on the nation? Are human rights something that depend upon what nation that you're in? Okay, you're nodding your head. Why you say, yeah, nod your head, no. I don't have your name on the CD chart. You want to tell me why? At least you're nodding. I appreciate that.
All I know, like I said last week, rights are for everybody. It doesn't matter what nation you come from. Everyone should have equal rights.
They're inherent, right? They're inherent in being human. What percentage is our DNA the same? Anybody in bio? I didn't get a lot of philosophy. You must be a lot of bio people in here, right? Who can tell me what's our DNA percentage? No, that's low, isn't it? It's 98, about 98.5, something like that. Let's go with 98%. It's a pretty remarkable thing when you think of it. It helps you to understand that there's a lot more commonality in really fundamental ways, but also it means that all these rights are inherent in being human, and we have them from the essence of being human. But it's still, at the same time, we have to concede that in different countries, we have them in various ways, which is why when I remember that first sentence about, it's what all the people are entitled to against their government? What do you think of that? Did it sound outlandish? Do you think that's me talking? When you first heard it, you think, oh yeah, this guy, he's a wishful dreamer guy, right? I mean, that's what it sounds like. Oh, human rights, that's what we're all entitled to. Everyone's entitled to against every government on earth. That sounds kind of silly, doesn't it? Right? Come on, didn't some of you think that way? So who was this? Who do you think said this? This was Thomas Jefferson writing a letter to James Madison on December 17, 1787, just 3 months after they all left the Constitutional Convention. Was there a Bill of Rights in the Constitution? Somebody answer that for me. Come on. Was there a Bill of Rights in the Constitution? No. Thank you, whoever said that. Was that you? Somebody. Thank you. No, there was no. They all voted against it. James Madison voted against the Bill of Rights. The father of the Bill of Rights voted against a Bill of Rights. And it was only afterwards when the people said, wait a minute, you want us to sign this thing? And there was opposition to signing it without a Bill of Rights. That's when it got stuck in, those 10 rights. That's when they got stuck in. And the reason I'm pointing this out is I want you to see how grounded this is. And so when I get further to talking about rights, you think, oh, boy, this is a struggle, or oh, this is, it's always been. There's nothing new about struggle and rights. Could women vote? When we had the Constitution was created, could women vote? Isn't that yet another example, just like the marriage example? Right? Would we have a second thought? First, I hope a lot of people voted today, right? You don't have to tell me if you voted, but I hope that as many women voted in this room as men. Do we even think twice about the right of women to vote? Foolish. It's part of our culture. It's just natural that women vote the same as men. Doesn't mean we have total equality, but the idea is that these struggles are struggles and then there's gradual progression. And that's why I want to start with that Thomas Jefferson, because I want you to have a sense of it. The other thing I want you to have a sense of is that it's a continuum. That Jefferson, he wasn't just talking about the United States. When Jefferson said that, did you notice? He's saying it's against every government on earth. That's his word. It's against every government on earth. So it's not just a limited vision. And later, with Franklin Roosevelt, and I'll mention this, you get the sense of that this is not something that's just one or two countries. This is something that, like DNA, is really about all of them. Okay? Everyone with me so far? Any questions? So with that as a starting point, then you get a sense in the Declaration of Rights of Man in France, they started to incorporate the same kinds of rights. There was an idea that these were things that were emerging against whoever would be in power. And that, I'm not going to go through all the various pieces, and you can go back earlier too with Hammurabi's Code and others. It's not just a Western idea. This has been percolating up through humanity at large. And I don't have time to go through all the little percolations of it. But it's been on the rise. And what happened was in World War II, what can you think of as one of the most atrocious things that happened in World War II? Yeah? Genocide. Holocaust, yeah. But it was also, there was at least 50 million or more people were killed. And it wasn't just that the Holocaust was an absolute horror. It was the fact that somebody could come up and in the name of state sovereignty, and maybe was Cynthia covering some of this? But I saw her speak last year. She was terrific. The idea that you could have more power with the nonviolent movements than violent ones is really, I was really impressed. But at any rate, as World War II, you had all this mass violence. Part of the idea was, how are we not going to have this happen again? There's no doubt that never again is something that we think of, and I'm not trying to say that it's not very unique to the Holocaust, because I think it takes special meaning there, but never again was something that when people met after World War II, they really felt that they were trying to come up with some new way of doing something different, right? So it really would be never again. So here you have, after World War II, you have this new consciousness about how are we going to stop these atrocious things from happening. And you can't just count on it being some government that's going to do it on its own. We have to have structures. Okay? And so what happened then was you had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that I was asking you about. Okay? So this Universal Declaration, I know you said many of you have read it. What is it? What do you recall being in it? Maybe I should, don't look at these pictures. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Because they're moving. Maybe I should just turn this off for a second. Especially with all these people. Oh, great. All right, now I have your undivided attention. But it shows you that pictures work, I guess. But at any rate, so who can tell me what's in this Universal Declaration? What kinds of rights are in here? Oh, yeah. Education. What else? What other rights are in here? Healthcare. What else? No slavery. Prohibition on slavery. What else? Free speech, right? What else? What's that? Shelter. Yeah, it's true. What else? Life? Religion. Okay? And that was an interesting one, because Gandhi was asked by Eleanor Roosevelt to help with this Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And he went out in typical Gandhian fashion. He took it really seriously. So he went out and he didn't have the internet, but he had the ability to go out and reach out to people all over the world and find out from them what they thought about their freedom of religion. And he had this great line with Eleanor that he wrote her a letter afterwards, and he said that I thought, this is the quote, I thought that the deeper that I went, the more disparity that I would find. Instead, I found that the deeper that I went, the more there was in common. And it's a really pretty profound thought, is that we see all this superficial rejection of rights, but then if we really plumb them, there can be a lot more people that believe in them and support them. And so with all of these, what do you notice about these and what you just said? I'm not going to ask for more. You know, a lot of the time when I teach, I'll start writing them all down on the board. But what do you notice about the rights that were just given? What kind are they? What kinds of rights? Yeah. They're all basic fundamental human rights, right? But let's think about the various kinds, right? Let's group them. Like you have, and you know, I actually think I'm perpetuating one of the problems that I'm going to try to address here, which is that they are whole. They probably should be looked at as a whole. And here I'm trying to think about civil and political and social and economic, because they all come up. And the social and economic tend to be education, healthcare, that sort of thing. And the civil and political tend to be assembly, free speech, religion. But they're all intertwined in this Universal Declaration. Yeah.
It seems very self-expressive. Like they seem like it's something that someone's trying to say and it's helpful because of our societal rules that we have. Like religion, education, Polish slavery is just a human like it's just expressing rights that people are trying to say but they can't.
Yeah, I think that there was a real, especially after World War II, these were rights that people felt that there was some commonality about. And the truth is, even in America at that time, there was strong, broad support for the idea of education as a human right. Okay, and healthcare is a human right. These are ongoing discussions that we have now, but these were things that universally, and that's why they ended up in this Universal Declaration, were things that were just thought in a more holistic way, and they should have been. But I don't want it to split that. But the important thing that I also want you to gather from this document, and what occurred, is that if you look at it, it's a declaration, right? A declaration is not enforceable in court. So a trial lawyer like me, I can't go and waive this declaration and get an order. I would like it. I might be able to use it to get the judge to think a little bit about it, but he's not going to give me an order based upon this. It's not law. And they understood that. So when Tim was asking me about, okay, where is the system strong and where is it lacking? That's where it's lacking, and they knew it. And when they put this declaration together in 1945, there was a famous professor who said, I don't like it. And they said, why? And he said, because you know what's going to happen? 50 years from now, people are going to be waving it around, acting like it's law, and it's not. And they're going to act like they have rights, and they don't. Because they can't enforce it. But others said, no, wait a minute, we got to do what we can. Right? Got the Cold War, it's a problem. We got to at least get a declaration. And I think they took the right course. I actually think that it was the right course to take this, to put together a declaration, because it's instilled the framework, but it still is weak. That's its weakness. That's where it's inadequate. And it's not enough to just go around holding it, waving it, reciting it. It's going to take more, which I'm going to get to. But that's the piece, and I wanted to address that. Yeah.
If you could give us an example of a specific order, you keep using that term, and I don't know if all these students might know what, like, you would come to a judge and say, you've heard that this is stopped, this is happening, and you want to make it stop, or make it happen. What do you mean by order? Just so they can understand how that is from a lawyer's perspective.
Well, sure, I'll give you a couple examples. One, I had, well, let's take the Occupy movement, when people were protesting in Oakland and they wanted to stay there overnight, and they tried to tell them they couldn't. And there was case law saying, no, you can have a vigil as long as you keep moving and you're not disrupting things, you're not breaking anything, you can keep moving. So I went and I prepared my federal court lawsuit and was ready to get an order. And they said, okay, we'll let you have a vigil, right? And it's the same thing with women's sports teams. Right? Using the numbers, you can run them and say, wait a minute, women need to have the same opportunities, and you can use that as an example. And religion, You can use it at times when people want to be able to practice their own faith. And there have been times when I've been on the side of people who said, look, I wanted to distribute information about my religion. And that is an example of a crossover of the two. You also run into a lot of racial discrimination. You know, that people think that racism is over, but it's not. I still see examples of racism pretty regularly. And not only do I think that I've won cases where I've stopped people from being engaged in discriminatory housing, for example. So these are all instances where not only do you have these rights, but you can enforce them. Okay, and so that's the difference. But to their credit, to get back to this, to their credit, what they did was there's Article 28 in here, and they realized that there was going to have to be a need for subsequent documents, right? And so they say in Article 28 that everyone's entitled to a social and international order in which these rights and freedoms are fully realized. So they could see that there was going to need to be more. Are you with me on this continuum? Seeing the flow here? Okay? So they can see that there's going to be more, and that's what this next booklet is. This is the more. This is the European Convention on Human Rights. How many of you have ever heard of the European Convention? Raise your hand if you've ever heard of it. You have? How did you hear about it?
From my constitutional law professor.
Oh, cool. And in what context did that come up?
I really don't recall, but we were comparing the international law, international conventions versus the convention that took place, that set place here.
Ah,
The continent.
excellent. That's excellent. I'm really glad that you get that perspective, because sometimes in America we have a rather narrow perspective. We're a huge country, and we tend to look at our law and our system, and we don't always realize what it would be like to have a regional system. But that's what this document is. This document applies. Trial lawyers and civil rights lawyers stand up in 47 countries using this document. And then there's a court in Strasbourg, France. Beautiful cylinders and glass and steel, and they go there, and the judges come in. It's wonderful when you're in there. And the judges come in, and they're all wearing their robes, and they're from all these different countries. And the lawyers are using the same document. And the person who wrote this, along with others, a guy named Rene Cassin, who helped Eleanor Roosevelt with this Universal Declaration. But he also became a judge on this court, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize for this work. And when he was given the Peace Prize, he just got up there before the committee, and he said, it works. And it does, which is why I'm here, and it's why I'm continuing this, because the next thing is, when you look at these regional systems, and then you get to our document, which is an International Bill of Rights. And the idea is that when you look at this evolutionary process, and I hope that I've given you a sense of one, right? How many of you, okay, let's turn this on now, that would be great. And then go on up, yeah, thank you. Perfect, perfect. Okay, how many of you have seen this document? Raise your hand if you've seen the document. And I'm not, have some of you read the document? Okay, great, thanks. And I hope that others of you will take a look. It takes about 10 minutes to read it. Can you flip? That's great. So here, okay, that's good. Here you have all the various articles. And I'm not going to go over all of them. But you can see how there's a mixture of some of the things that we've talked about, right? There's representation and voting up at the top, which we just had today. But see there in Article 11, what's unique about that? Can anyone read it? Can you read it up there? Can you see it? It says environment. When they did the Universal Declaration, they weren't thinking of the environment. It's not in here. It's missing. And it's only because at that time it wasn't as much of an issue. But if you were going to have an International Bill of Rights, if you were writing a Bill of Rights, would you include the environment? So that's partly what this is about. It's thinking about the various things that you would choose. And this has been an ongoing process for a long time. where we've had a lot of input and we want more. So that's one of the great ways that you can contribute to this process is if you think about it, you can read through it and you can think for yourself about what you would like, what writes. Go ahead and flip some more. Let's think about it. So this is an introduction, and I'm not going to try to go through all of it. I do think that this part right here, you see those 3 questions? Can anyone read that? Somebody read that? I'll get out my seating chart.
Will you read it? Will you sign it? Will you share it?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let me ask you, and please tell me the truth. Will you read it? Okay. Why wouldn't you read it? Why are you here? And you're here because there are creative ideas that percolate up through the college environment in all sorts of fields. And you get the benefit of actually participating here. This is something where you, hopefully, the reasons for reading it is that it's for your own edification is too long, but just, your own thoughts and insight, right? Will you sign it? Is there anyone here who signed it? I thank you. And I think that this is something that it's a personal choice, but it's a really important one. Because, look, if you don't exercise your power, and I'm glad that you went to vote today. That's the best way that we exercise our power, is we go and we vote. And we have that. But this is about actually thinking about the rules for those who govern. And I know it seems like it's an unlikely thing, but it was an unlikely thing that there was going to be a Bill of Rights or that there was going to be these other documents here as well. And there's a set of rights that are percolating up. And so make a decision for yourself. That's what I ask the most. Okay? We aren't trying to get you to say, oh, sign, you have to sign. We're trying to get you to ask yourself, should I sign? Will I sign? And if not, why not? Okay? So that's why we're asking you that. And the other is, now, will you share it? And that's really today's opportunity. Okay, because today, we have a new world in some ways. Right? We have the same old DNA in some ways, but we also have some new opportunities. The internet and the rest of it has given us a chance where it's possible to have an agreement to live together. It's possible for students sitting in some auditorium in Berlin or in Buenos Aires are thinking about the same kinds of questions, right? Or in Shanghai, or in Moscow. And so that's the thing, is that this is the opportunity to do these 3 things. To read it, to sign it, and share it. Okay? And then this is the mission that we have, is to try to have 10% of humanity sign an agreement to live together, which I realize is a lot. Which is why now I'm right on time with my promise. Here's what I want to plumb with you all. Right? I've gone over this history, and I've given you an example of what we're doing, and I've shown you. Here's where I want you to help. So, you know that we've been calling this an International Bill of Rights, right? And for years now, we've been calling it that. But a lot of people have felt that it's not the best way to present something because it's too nation-state oriented. When really what we're talking about is a more fundamental type of movement, a more fundamental level and a participatory level. So here's the question that I have for you all, and I'd like you to think about it with me, because we're, our board and people, we have conference calls with people in Europe and South America, and we're trying to decide our next step. And I want you all to help, Because here's what we're thinking about. We have a big marketing and branding organization, and they do marketing and branding for big, like Ross Dress for Less. Okay, anybody ever hear of the RED movement? Right, RED. Has anyone heard of RED? Yeah. Okay, what is it? Right. It was. Anybody ever buy a RED product? Yeah. So I have a RED Apple, and there was a lot of it, and so they worked on that. So here's what they're saying. What they're saying is, open this up. And we're right in the midst of this right now because I'm holding version 9. We've had 70,000 of these booklets in 5 different languages. We're now going to version 10. We're about to print. We're all having this discussion about what should be on the cover, and I'm sharing it with you because I want your input. So our branding people are saying to us, you need to expand, here are the choices. On version 10, do we say International Bill of Rights, or do we say Global Bill of Rights? And they think that global has a broader, more inclusive feeling to it, that people will respond in a more immediate way, feel like they're a part of that. So, what do you think? Let me do it. I want a show of hands. Okay? How many people prefer on version 10 that this say Global Bill of Rights? How many prefer that it says International Bill of Rights? Let's start with the global people. Okay? Some of you, tell me, why do you feel that way? Yes, thank you.
International feels like there's a little division, whereas global feels whole. Like when I hear global, I picture including everybody. And international, in my mind, creates like separation from different locations. So I just feel like it's one unity kind of.
The Webster definition says the whole earth. It's the whole earth. What else?
I would say it's similar to that international, just looking at how people interpret it, kind of implies the human involvement. Where when you say global, you bring it down to the individual. As far as the person has not.
Did you hear what he was saying? Did you hear him over here? He's saying it brings it down to a personal level. Is that true? If you hear, if someone were to say to you, hey, are you willing to sign, or are you willing to read this Global Bill of Rights? Would you feel it was more inclusive to you than if someone said to you, are you willing to read this International Bill of Rights? What? Why?
When you heard the term global and I heard the term international, I immediately get drawn to the word nation, which immediately takes my attention to the fact that there's a lot of issues in nations, at this moment. And what about a broken nation who's gonna say that we're not a nation, so therefore we're not included? And then nations that are under dictatorship or under rule, or just have a broken governmental system. I don't know. That's my initial thought.
Everyone gather that? Everyone hear her? Because again, you look at the because I have this huge unabridged dictionary. Of course, like most of you, I'm not a Luddite. I do just spell check and the rest of it, but I have a huge dictionary in my office. So I went over to this thing, opened it up, and under international, it's just what she says. She says it's the issues that arise between nation states.
And then the word global brings the power back down to the people, whereas international law, international relations, who deals with that stuff? The governments that, sustain the nations. So
Other thoughts? Other thoughts on why global? Yeah.
I think it's the parlance of the times, right? So when we hear about global economy, we hear about global pandemics, so things like that. I think this fits what is now part of our system. And I think before we're much more isolationist. I think in the more modern times we become more globally looking, if not
If out of necessity, right? These global, there's a line that I'm sure you've all heard, which is global problems require global solutions, right? And I think you're there. I'll give you a great example. Okay, how many of you heard about the big climate change march that took place, right? I don't know, maybe some of you were in that or not. I was in it here in the Bay Area, and then we had friends that were in New York at the 400,000. You know, on the exact same day, that was the biggest march in history, by the way, if you look at it internationally. On that exact same day, Putin, with ExxonMobil, really only because of ExxonMobil, an American company, drilled a new well into the Arctic that they could only get to because of global warming. Exact same day they tapped that. That new well has over 1 billion barrels. It's got as much as the Gulf of Mexico. And you know what they say? They say that as global warming increases and that ice breaks up even more, that there are other pools around it that have billions more. So if you think that there's going to be some stop in global warming without struggle, that's just not going to happen. Those forces, this is that global point, those forces, those global forces are much more powerful than the local ones. I'm not saying you shouldn't drive a hybrid. I'm not saying you shouldn't be conscious or do all these smaller things. I'm in favor, and I do them myself. Being aware, that not only is provide for better health, provide for a better world, but it's not going to do it. It's not. And it's the same thing as the stratification of wealth internationally. You got 2% of the people in the U.S. with 76% of all wealth now. And if you look at all the curves, I'm sure you've been hearing this. How many people have heard all this from the globe, right? From Occupy? Have you heard anything about the stratification of wealth? If you have, raise your hand and I'll stop. Okay? So I'll stop. Because we've all heard, we all know. What it does is, when you have rights like education and healthcare, you don't create complete equality. No one's talking about redistribution. We're talking about having a decent world for every person with then still massive stratification. Okay, so the global thing, that's a good point. Now, I want to hear from the international side. Who likes international? I mean, it's been dear to me for a while. Some people up here. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I think it depends on exactly how you're trying to change the world. So if you're wanting 10% of humans to sign this and they in their respective countries start nonviolent movements and try to rally for these, these international rights, then I think it makes sense to call it a global bill of rights. But if you're talking about setting up court systems throughout the world that everyone is beholden to, then I think that has to happen on a nation-by-nation level. Because we're in this country, in our nation, we have certain rights, and in another country they may not. And so that's where the boundary is. So maybe international or transnational bill of rights or something like that might make more sense if you're trying to go from that angle.
Everyone heard his point, and it's a really good one. It's a really good one. So I want, again, flip this for a second again. Flip it open, keep going. Go, go, go. Whoop, whoop. Okay, flip back one more time. All right. Okay, here it is. All right. Global problems require global solutions, blah, blah, blah. To this end, 2 campaigns are the core of IBOR, which if we did go to, it would be GBOR. But it's the signature campaign, right, which is one you're talking about, to get people to sign the document. Why? Because unless you have a certain amount of force, I've been to Geneva every year for 12 years. And I've gone with Margaret Anderson. Any of you studying with Margaret? I would hope somebody, yeah. And she's really good with dialogue. And she's worked with us in Geneva, and she was here last year. And so that's a great opportunity because in Geneva, what happens is we have the juncture that he's talking about. There's a signature campaign, individuals. And then the government's only likely if first millions of people lead the way, okay? But then, okay, flip. Flip again. This is the signature campaign. No, wait, I'm sorry, go back. Go back one more, I missed it. Why? Good questions. Where's our tree? Okay, flip. No, yeah, here it is, right here. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to stare up at it. But this is the answer to his question. This is 2 campaigns, a treaty campaign. You can't have this come about by just having all the people sign and participate. You need to have the governments. But the first thing you need, and they can work in parallel, you need to have the people that are actually taking a role. This is why I'm gravitating towards this global. Because I think they're right, and I'm not so foolish to think that I'm not going to be open. Especially after I hear and see a response like this here. And most of us feel that way. But still, you got to get to this. You got to get to the point where you go to the governments too. And this is where the UN system is really important, because you go there, you get a working group, you start to get different countries that all start looking at something together, and you proceed with this treaty campaign, and you do that at the same time. But governments don't really act unless people act first. It's kind of, that's why I make such a big deal out of the vote there on the Bill of Rights. And it's really hard to ever get something like that unless the people initiate it. So it's, these two, they go in parallel. Any other thoughts on international? Here's my next question, since this is so enlightening for me. How? Let's go with global. So let's say we do have a global Bill of Rights. How do we get people to sign it? Read it, sign it, share it. How do we do that? I'm stubborn. Go.
I think the way that we communicate more now in this generation is through social media and things like YouTube. That's quick access to us, but that's only, I guess we could say, the West. And you're thinking of other countries that may not have, like, that internet may not be accessible to them, then probably postal or a big card.
And so everyone hear her point? That she's talking about this opportunity with the internet. In a way, it is something similar to a breakthrough with the printing press, right? Humanity took this incredible leap, and it was with rights in part because all of a sudden ideas could be circulated in a mass manner, and people could read them. And it's hard for us to believe, but when Thomas Paine was writing about the rights of man, it was a bestseller. I envy him. You know, I have my book here. This, at least it was a bestseller in the Bay Area, but I couldn't get it to go internationally as hard as I tried. Thomas Paine his book was selling all over the world, or at least I can't say all over the world. That's not fair. It was selling in Europe and the United States at the same time. But it was the point I'm getting at is that there's a different mindset now. You can have books, but they don't really do the trick. They're good for in-depth, and if any of you want a book, if you send me an email or something, I'll make sure that you get it if you want to go in-depth. That's good. They're good for in-depth. But for the reaching people, it's about how to do it at the internet, right? It's about how to connect with people in a simpler way. So here's the next thing I want to run by you. So here's what their suggestion is. Again, this is from the marketing and branding people. It's a good experience for you. When you go out, whatever you do, you're going to need to be able to reach people. That's what they're about. So what they're saying is, in this read, sign, and share, is they're saying, you're asking for too much. Like, I appreciate that a few of you read it. It really is seriously only 10 minutes. And so I hope a few more of you, I hope this sparks enough of an interest, a few more of you might read it too. But they're saying don't expect them to read it all that carefully. Don't make it so onerous. And so they have an idea for a pledge. They want to have the question be a pledge. And the pledge is all people in all countries have human rights. I pledge, in solidarity with others internationally, to respect and share the rights in a global Bill of Rights. I just changed that thanks to this class. Global Bill of Rights. So what do you think about that pledge? What do you think about the idea of a pledge? About asking people to sign a pledge instead of asking them to read and sign an entire document. Yeah.
I think a pledge is more personal. So I think they'll feel better. I think just reading something, signing it on the internet only goes so far. And you know, not a lot of people probably go out and tell people, hey, I read this really cool thing, sign it. A pledge is something that you are pledging yourself to share that with other people, not just share it yourself.
Yeah. Everyone hear her? I think this is one of the things that we've talked about that I think has been one of the most captivating, really, the thought of it, is that it's saying to people, okay, what do you think? And then they make a personal choice. Because one of the best things about this process is you make a personal choice. You're not making it because someone's telling you. You're going through, and so it's the same way with the pledge. But the commitment you're talking about is when you sign a pledge, then you're saying, okay, I'm in. Right? And what happens is, if she's right, then over time, it's kind of like that women vote today. Does anyone here doubt that women have an equal right to vote? No. Is a civil rights lawyer like me needed to make it happen? No, I can't recall anything recently. Right? It becomes part of your, even though with a few people making the choices, making that personal pledge, it becomes part of society. But what other people think about it? Yeah.
I think there's a piece of the marketing that's missing there. So I think the pledge is a great idea, but you really need to get local stars to sign on to your project to really get the message out to folks who, like she said, didn't have access to the internet, who maybe have access to music, like music, international music superstars, or things that are, music is a global thing. So I think it's something that you probably have to really, spread your message.
You mean a bunch of scholars from around the world that are going to, that's not thrilling enough? Huh?
Well, you get the
Is he right? Is he right? So who would you pick? Okay, so who should sign this? Come on, if he's right, who should sign this? Who would be the most impacting? Yeah.
I disagree with you. I think instead of looking for people who would have the most impact on it, I think you should look for people who would be impacted the most by it. People who don't have it, or people who would benefit by having it.
I agree with them. Who is your target audience?
Thank you.
However, I understand that, but if you get 10% of the world that already has all of these rights assigned, and it never gets the people who would benefit from having these rights, then what have we gained?
What have we gained by that? If 10% of the people in the world sign something together, what's gained by that? What does that do? What good is it? Well, do we have a right to education in this room? No, we don't. Not a constitutional right. There's nothing in this document that says that you have a right to education. The United States Supreme Court has specifically held that you do not have a constitutional right to education. You have a right to health care? No. You got a brain tumor and you're standing outside the hospital, you have a right, and you get to ask that judge, tell her, look, my client here has a brain tumor. No, not in America. So we shouldn't be too quick about, and you have a right to be able to distribute this International Bill of Rights in China? No, they wouldn't, publishers wanted to publish my book. They wouldn't let them publish it because it talks about Tiananmen Square. So you're right that there are a lot of places that don't have these rights. But I just want to show you that it's both ways, it's both directions. And what we have is, if we sign, what we really have is power. It's one of the few times that people can actually exercise it's like we're coming up on the anniversary of the Magna Carta. It's one of the few times where the people can actually write the rules for those who govern. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it doesn't take a lot of your time. Right? So it's about power. Any questions?
Sure,
Yeah.
It's not a question, it's more of a comment.
Yeah.
You did ask what your target goal was and what we could benefit from 10% of people signing it, but you really think about it, 10% is not a whole lot, but that's 10% more than read that, and that's 10% more than can share. So if that's, I think, this target is that 10% may not seem like a lot to us, but that 10% is what 10.
Well, that 10% ends up becoming, look, at the end of the day, even the printing press, as successful as it was because it was followed by word of mouth and it was followed by action. And so in closing here, there are just two things that I want to ask you to do on that way. One, I want you to think about reading, signing, and sharing, and go to the document, take a look, take that 10 minutes. Okay? So how many now are willing to take the 10 minutes?
Well, it's homework.
It's homework. Well, I appreciate that, Tim. I appreciate that, but I hope that, through this, and through this conversation, it's a pleasure for me to have this conversation. And believe me, I'll be talking with others, so I hope it's not just that you're required to. The second thing that I want you to ask for is if you do sign, and you want to help us, remember how all those pictures were streaming by, right? We want more. So if you feel like you want to contribute, when you do sign, if you want to contribute your picture, that would be much appreciated, okay? So think about doing that, and you feel free to send me an email if you want to participate in any way or you have any additional thoughts. I would really, we all would, and I'd share them with my colleagues. And most of all, thank you very much for your time and for this great opportunity to have a dialogue with all of you. Thank you.